Welcome, readers. Today on Book Chat, we are breaking down the May Buddy Read title, The Night Shift, written by Alex Finlay. Also, today I am joined by a guest co-host, Kelly from the Boobies and Noobies podcast. Stay tuned. Today's episode is sponsored in part by Amazon Music. Check it out. It has 70 million songs, thousands of playlists. You can listen without commercials. Sign up today and get your first month for free using the Shelf Addiction link. Go to getamazonmusic.com/shelf addiction and sign up today. Again, the code is Shelf Addiction. The link is also in the show notes. Hey everyone, I'm your host, Tamara Ford, and thank you for downloading this month's Buddy Read discussion featured here on the Shelf Addiction podcast. If you're new here, every week we get bookish with book discussions, book reviews, shelf bites, and more. If you're wondering what is a Buddy Read, this is a feature where Classy and I select a thriller or mystery title that we both are interested in. Then we have a candid conversation about that book or audiobook. We even discuss it in our Facebook group, Shelf Addiction Official, during a live chat. So grab a glass of wine, a cocktail, a cup of tea or coffee, whatever your drink of choice is, and settle in for this fun discussion. As always with book chats, there is a spoiler alert in effect, so you've been warned. If you enjoyed today's episode, please support this podcast by sharing it with your book nerd friends or on your favorite social media space. That will really help me out, and I appreciate you for doing it. The uncut video version of this podcast is available now on Patreon. Join us there for exclusive videos, including this podcast after show. If you'd like to support the show in other ways, please consider doing that by supporting our sponsors. By supporting them, you are supporting us. Check out all of the sponsors at shelfaddiction.com/sponsors. If you've read the book or listened to the audiobook and would like to weigh in on this conversation, be sure to join the Facebook group Shelf Addiction Official. I hope to hear your thoughts on this discussion. Links for everything I've mentioned are in the show notes, so let's get going. We've got a lot to cover today, so we are going to jump right on into it. Joining me is the Buddy Read feature guest co-host, Kelly Reynolds. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to do this.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you're here. And tell me about yourself a little bit and tell me about your podcast.
Absolutely. So my name is Kelly, as you said, and I host a podcast called Boobies and Noobies, and it is a romance novel review podcast, although I do interview authors from time to time as well. But the whole idea kind of came about because I'm a longtime romance reader, and for many, many years, I've had friends, family, coworkers, teachers who have kind of criticized what I choose to read most of the time. And so I thought, okay, well, have you given it a shot? Because it's not really fair to judge a book by its cover, let alone an entire genre. So that was sort of the idea behind the podcast, was to introduce newbie romance readers to read their first-ish romance novel and talk about it with me.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. And I love your title. It's like, okay, I've got to find out what this is about because it's so grabbing. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. And once you start a podcast called Boobies and Noobies, you start to have lots of stuff around your apartment, like pop up covered in boobs. So I have like boobs on my shower curtain. Like, I don't know if you can see, I have like boob glass art on the wall. Like it's just a part of my personality now, apparently.
Oh, that is hilarious. Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're here. And so you do like thrillers and mysteries and stuff too.
I do. I would say what's funny is I feel like a lot of romance readers, when they're not reading romance, the next genre that they talk about is like murder, mystery, true crime, thriller. And that's kind of, I cut my teeth on Agatha Christie. Like Agatha Christie was like one of the first authors I remember devouring a backlist for. So
nice.
Murder mysteries and thrillers have been kind of part of my reading plan for many, many years.
All right. Nice. Like I'm kind of the opposite. Like I feel like right now I'm really into this thriller mystery. I read so much of it. And then when I need a little break or, a little palate cleanser, I will pick up a romance or,
That's normal.
Yes, yes.
I just do it in reverse where I'm like, I've had enough love. Today I choose murder.
Murder. Murder is a fun break. What can we say?
Oh, boy.
All right. So as we do, I'm going to share the stats on the book, and then Kelly will share the synopsis. So if you guys haven't read it, you know nothing about it, you'll have a little bit of insight, and then we're going to just jump into the conversation. So today we are talking about The Night Shift by Alex Finlay, narrated by Brittany Presley, Katie McLean, Devon Hales, and Gary Tideman. 4 narrators, guys. Okay, wow. Published March 1st, 2022 by Minotaur Books and Macmillan Audio. The hardcover comes in at 312 pages, and the unabridged audio comes in at 8 hours and 34 minutes. Not bad. Kelly, would you kindly share the synopsis?
Absolutely. It's New Year's Eve, 1999. Y2K is expected to end in chaos. Planes falling from the sky, elevators plunging to Earth, world markets collapsing, a digital apocalypse. None of that happens, but at a Blockbuster Video in Linden, New Jersey, 4 teenage girls working the night shift are attacked. Only one survives. Police quickly identify a suspect who flees and is never seen again. 15 years later, in the same town, 4 teenage employees working late at an ice cream store are attacked, and again, only one makes it out alive. Both surviving victims recall the killer speaking only a few final words, "Good night, pretty girl." In the aftermath, 3 lives intersect: the survivor of the Blockbuster massacre, who's forced to relive her tragedy, the brother of the original suspect, who's convinced the police have it wrong, and the FBI agent who's determined to solve both cases. On a collision course toward the truth, all 3 lives will forever be changed, and not everyone will make it out alive.
Dun, dun, dun. All right. That was a good synopsis. It was pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think so.
I always hate the synopsises when they don't really talk about what's in the book. You're like, wait a minute, the book was nothing about that. What are they even talking about? That have you seen those on some mysteries?
There are times where I feel like the synopsis covers the first chapter of the book, and then the rest of that just is a whole other story, or vice versa, where you get like the full plot in the synopsis, kind of like that whole movie trailer thing where you get all the good parts in the trailer.
Like they told everything. Why read it now?
Right, exactly. So I thought this was a pretty accurate way to sum it up, and without giving too much away, but enough to like catch your interest.
Absolutely. And that's why we picked it. We picked this one because the synopsis was so great. I've never read Alex Finlay before. Have you read him before?
No, I haven't. And I saw, at least with this book, there was like, some praise for his previous book too. So I'll have to go back and read that one now.
Yeah, I feel like I will. Okay, so let's just jump into it. So when you close the book and you were on the last page, what did you think?
Overall, I really enjoyed it. Like I'd say overall, I had a very positive response. I am all for a murder mystery. I watch a lot of British crime dramas, and I feel like because of that, part of me has been ruined by them in that I think I predict killers way too easily.
Okay.
But that being said, I think there were a lot of great things throughout the book, like all the right red herrings and all the right twists and turns, that it always felt like it was moving forward. Like I always felt like we were learning more, information about each of the cases. Okay, how are these tying together? How are these people involved tying together? So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. I would 100% recommend it to mystery and thriller readers for sure.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so when I ended, I listened to the audiobook, and I got to be honest, when I first started, I was like, wow, there's so many points of view. It took me a minute to get into it. But once I was in it, I was in it. And at the end of it, I was like, wow, that's fun. I'm like, yeah, those bad things happened, but I was satisfied with the ending.
Yeah.
So I always love when I'm satisfied with the ending, especially when, there were so many bad things happening, you really couldn't do a full-on skip off into the sunset, but we got a little as happy as you can be, right?
Yeah, like I have some complaints about the ending just because I felt like it was wrapped up very quickly in this like tidy 1 year later epilogue, which I can tell you just from like my romance reading experience is something I cannot stand. I do not.
So you don't like it?
I am not an epilogue fan in general. And I am especially not a let's skip into the future to see how happy everybody is now kind of epilogue. Like I'm like, I want to live in this moment with these characters and I don't need to know that everything works out perfectly for people. Like if I can have like some inkling that that's going to happen or that, you know, whatever happens next is a great step forward. I love it. But yeah, I did like that most of the people in the end survived. I was very upset that one of them, I think, did not, although it's never really addressed.
Yes, that's one of my little things here. Yes, I agree. Because at first I just thought, okay, dang, everybody died except for what's her face? Keller. I thought, I'm like, did everybody die? And then I'm like, oh, that ending. I'm like, oh, I guess they survived. So that tells me that the other person left, he died. And when she named her twins after him, I'm like, oh, he's definitely dead.
He's gone. And that was really sad to me. Like, and here's the thing. I knew going into like a thriller like this, I don't necessarily expect everyone to live. But you start with one of the main characters, the agent, is pregnant, like 8 months pregnant with twins. My first thought is nothing better happened to this woman or these babies, or I'm going to be outraged. And so if it's not her, I was like, well, now we're down to a few other people that it could be. So it was just anybody's guess at that point, I guess.
And, you know, speaking of Keller's pregnancy, I am not anti-baby, right? But I just am not like, yay, babies everywhere, pregnant ladies. I'm not really about that.
I'm so glad. This is like the perfect pairing then for this.
Because I was like, does she have to be that pregnant? I mean, her ass is waddling around this bitch with twins. Like,
that's
what are you
real
doing?
Pregnant.
Right. Like, girl, what are you doing? Like, take a seat somewhere. I'm sorry. And every time she got into something, I'm like, shit, is she going to get stabbed in the stomach? What's going to happen? Like, I kept thinking these horrible things.
I know. Well, and then there was something weird to me from the very beginning. The way that it's written, she's never like referred to by her first name. Like the narrator refers to her as Keller, and everybody for the most part calls her Keller. And I was genuinely worried. I was like, are they trying to make like distance us between her, but between us, the reader, and her character, so that if something awful does happen, she'll be like less of a human being because we're not on a first name basis with her. Like,
no,
I was like, I don't know why we've made this choice, but, thankfully, that's not what happens. But I'm with you. It's just like I'm not a fan of the epilogue thing in general.
Yeah.
I am not a huge fan of like, let's fast forward to marriage and babies.
I know. And to be honest, I don't see a lot of epilogues like this in thriller and mystery titles. I don't really see it that often. Yeah. It's unusual.
It was interesting, too, because we go from climax to epilogue. Like there isn't that. I think was probably like my biggest complaint was just that we have this huge climactic showdown that you expect in every thriller. And you have all these questions about like, oh my gosh, who lived, who died, what happened? But they don't necessarily all get answered. We jump straight from that to 6 months in the future. I feel like we were missing a chapter like at the end. So other than that, though, throughout the book, I was in it to win it.
That's good. Because, I mean, at first, so I think that I'm kind of like you. I was in once I settled in, I was in for the ride. But I think I did kind of have a slight issue with like all the characters that were in these incidents. I had to write down names.
Oh, I did too. I did like a little chart where I was like, yes. Oh, love to this person, and then arrow over here, lawyer, and then it's just I'd have to write 1999 next to some of them, and then 2015 next to other ones.
Yes, same.
Yeah.
I'm like, it was so much going on that you could almost get a little lost, especially when talking about the Blockbuster incident. And when things started coming together, I'm like, okay, then I started to like rhyme the names. Okay, Mandy, Candy. And then, because I'm like, okay. And then the current girls, I'm like, okay, we didn't get as much about them because it was more about Jess than anybody.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm terrible with names. Like overall, like I could love a book, have just finished it, and not be able to tell you the name of the main character. Like the only reason I'm able to tell you anybody's name is because of this chart that I've created for myself as a refresher. But yeah, I do think when you're working with multiple points of view throughout the book, and not even just two, like I feel like in romance, a lot of the times we get two characters, but we're talking about three regularly, like three different points of view throughout. Ella, Chris, and Keller. See, look, I'm already messing up the names, but and then there would be other ones. There would be other ones intermingled that I was like, wait a second. Who is this person? Oh, we're back in 1999. Okay.
Right. Oh, we're back again. Got it.
Yeah. All righty. But
yeah, definitely. So I do think they had a few too many characters that we had to learn about. Like, so I think for me, the best part, I almost wanted to just hear the story in the past, to be honest. I mean, because I'm not about to tell you how old I am, but I did go to Blockbuster when I was a kid.
Oh, me too, girl. And I was around in 1999. I remember Y2K.
Me too. I remember all these things and sipping Zimas when you're not supposed to be sipping Zimas. And all that stuff. And I'm like, I was down for let's go back and have like a little campy thing. I wanted that a little bit, but we got some of it. We got a good amount.
Well, and let me tell you, this book, if nothing else, is prime material for a Netflix miniseries. Like this is that 1 8-episode miniseries that you could put together very easily, and you could expand on the stuff in the 90s. Mm-hmm. You could expand on what's going on today. You could dive into, other characters' points of view. You could even write it almost like every character has their own point of view each episode. Yeah. There's so much that you could do with this story. And I think this is the right time to write a book like this because this is what they're making for TV. So this would be a fantastic miniseries to watch.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I think that even Freeform could pull this off because they did that summer one. Did you watch that?
I watched the beginning and then I didn't finish it.
It was good. And it was like dark. And it was like, dang, this is effed up what's going on here. And it reminded me of that because of the flashbacks between the present and the past.
Yeah. So, I love it. And I do love people also love their nostalgia, just like we're talking about, people love, especially the 80s and 90s. I don't know why those are the two decades that continue to come back time and time again, because the fashion was awful. The music was something else. Like, but it keeps coming back. And
it does.
Maybe again. I don't know.
I mean, honestly, I dip into my 90s playlist on Spotify a couple times a month.
All the time.
I'm like, I'm always in the 90s.
Usually when I'm cooking.
I love the 90s. So I love that part of it. And I really liked how Ella's character, how she was like so messed up, but also a therapist at the same time. And they say that therapists can help other people, but they can't help themselves.
I mean, every person I know who's a therapist has their own therapist. Like, it's just, I think it's hard to, I think a lot of people become therapists because of trauma or like how they wish they had processed trauma and they want to help people with that. But because they have such an insight into it and because they're constantly taking on other people's trauma, of course they're going to need help.
Yeah. And it's wild because I did have a therapist that said, you know, when I was in therapy, I'm like, what? I'm like, okay.
That's good. That's good. I think that's a good sign.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, then you're not crazy trying to tell me something crazy. Okay, great. But I liked her. I liked, like, even though she wasn't like a good person per se, you know, how she decided to deal with getting her boyfriend to break up with her or fiance.
Yeah.
That was kind of stupid.
Yeah, she definitely, I mean, you're talking about 15 years worth of, survivor's remorse and all kinds of unprocessed. Well, and what's interesting about that is I feel like it's still not wrapped up in the end, because up until the ending, she's been popping pills every now and then, which are never fully addressed. And again, we don't really get much of a conclusion with anybody except for Agent Keller and her husband and their babies. And so I know we get to see kind of where, am I allowed to spoil things?
Yeah, we spoil.
Okay.
Because it's spoil. Yeah.
I know we get to see that, like, yes, Chris and Ella not only survive, but they get to like go on and travel and do all these things together. And I'm like, that's great. I'm happy for you guys. But what about the story we've been like talking about this whole time? Like, I wish there had been more of a wrap up with them.
Yeah. So like, okay, guys, so the two of them have a very interesting connection. And it's like, okay, we already talked about how Ella's messed up from her. She was the lone survivor from the 99 attack. So she's had all these things, you know, going around. And then we later find out that she dated the guy who was accused of murdering everybody. And she doesn't remember if it was him or not. She doesn't know. So in her mind, she's thinking, well, the facts line up. It must have been him.
And then add in Chris, who is his brother, the accused's brother. And he is now a lawyer, changed his name, you know, went on to live a new life. But he is now drawn back into the new situation going on, the new series of murders. And he and Ella end up like running off together.
Yeah,
in the
they're
end.
like together. So like, okay, the scene where I knew, okay, I kind of felt like there was chemistry there. And I'm like, do you realize this is your ex's brother?
Yeah.
But like the scene at her mother's house. So the police, the FBI are there digging up the backyard for a body. And the body turns out to be Vincent, Chris's brother. And instead of him like losing his shit, he grabs her hand and they leave. I'm like, wait a minute. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
It's one of those things that I feel like is a trope in a lot of mysteries and thrillers, is like trauma bonding. Like the people who go through these traumatic experiences, like usually a couple of them get together. And I do understand it because I know that that's like a real thing, but I'm just kind of like, do we need it? Like, does it have to happen?
It didn't have to.
Gone off and each had their own lives too? Yeah, because she also never talked about doing all this traveling like Chris did. Chris is the one who talked about wanting to be this like wanderer. I wanted something different for her. I wanted her to have some different ending that was, you know, maybe it was as simple as like going to therapy. I mean, it could have just been something that didn't solve all her problems in like one fell swoop.
Because in real life, we know that trauma bonds usually don't last. They don't really work out. Because once you start to get healthy, or, you know, you start to realize who this person is after the trauma has died down some or settled or whatever, I'm like, that was not ideal. I am with you on that, Kelly. I would have preferred she go off in her own set of circumstances. Actually, I would have loved if she had maybe decided to take in Jess instead of her mother.
Yeah, which was so random. I mean, that didn't make any sense to me. Like, again, this is all within like the epilogue. It's just that I thought Alex Finlay did just such a great job of like setting up these people throughout the book that I feel like by the end, it was just wrapped up so quickly that it didn't make sense with like the characters that we had necessarily developed throughout the book. And I thought that they were great, well-rounded, conflicted, messy characters. I love a messy character, let me tell you. But yeah, I don't know. It was a little too neat with a bow for me at the end.
Yeah. And then not only that, I feel like there were a few things that weren't wrapped up. You know how we talked about, or we mentioned, was Atticus dead or not? Right?
They never say. They never actually say.
There was another thing. Was Jess lying about the photo, or was the principal dude, whoever the guy, the teacher, the English teacher, newspaper class guy, was he lying?
That was an interesting storyline. Just because I don't know. First of all, I never want to doubt when somebody like makes accusations against somebody. So it was interesting to see that they went to talk to the teacher first before talking to her, and talking to him. He makes it sound like she was stalking him. And I'm thinking like, oh no, that couldn't have been it. Like, because then we're going to start doubting Jess's character altogether. But then we do for like a hot second. And then when they interview her, I'm like, okay, well, we just solved that problem then. It seems like she's telling you how it is. She, woke up in his bed. He had some like seedy pictures of her, doesn't remember how it happened. And of course I'm going to believe her when she says that. So that was, I guess sometimes there were like clues that were laid out and meant to make you doubt things. But then we would kind of like dispel those doubts within the next chapter. And that's fine.
But whatever happened, did I miss something? Like, what happened?
In the epilogue, when they're watching her interview on TV, there's like a very, very brief mention of how she had written an article about that experience, that assault with the teacher, and a bunch of other students had come forward and said that they were
he went to jail.
I don't know.
I'm like, because that's what I want to hear. If you're going to tell me this, I want to know that he got in trouble. I want to know that he went to jail, or is he just skipping around town in another district, or what? Like,
a lot of unanswered questions.
So that's one of them. Then I had another one. So, well, actually, this isn't necessarily unanswered. So, you know what? Actually, guys, it's time for a break. We're going to take a quick break. You see how I get. I'm all into it. So we got to take a quick commercial break. We're going to check out these sponsors. By listening to the commercials, you are supporting the podcast. While you are listening, feel free to click around in the show notes. Check out the book review journal and the book review notebook, available right now on Amazon, designed by yours truly. I would love if you checked it out. And we'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by the Shelf Addiction merch store. Check out all the bookish t-shirts, notebooks, mugs, and more. Don't miss out on these original designs, perfect for any book nerd. Support the podcast and visit shelfaddiction.com/merch and pick up your next favorite bookish item. All right, welcome back, guys. We are going to continue our discussion, and there's lots more. Okay, so my other thing I wanted to mention was like this whole Mr. Nirvana thing.
Yeah, another red herring, I guess. Like, there's a lot of them. It's one of those things where you just kind of wonder, was there too much? Too many characters? Too many plot twists, too many red herrings. I guess I would have preferred to spend a little more time on one thing at a time, as opposed to going, oh, Is she lying? Next chapter. Nope, she's not. Okay, next one. Let's do this. And so it seemed like a lot, but you're right. This one I was okay with, but I didn't love.
So did you think that was going to be Vincent, or did you know it wasn't Vincent?
I didn't think it was going to be him. I thought it was going to be too easy if it was him. Like, if you've spent the last 15 years wondering where your brother is, I think you cling to any shred of hope that this could be it, that this one thing, this one person that, it's a faceless vlogger who goes by Mr. Nirvana, and Nirvana was always like the code word, that you had together when you were kids. It's too many coincidences for me to buy into. And I knew that
me too.
If it wasn't him, he was probably going to be dead.
Yeah, I kind of felt the whole time. I'm like, no, this is not what you think it is. And that scene when they caught up with him and, in the park, I'm like, oh, that's sad.
I wanted it to be him. Yeah. I mean, it got to the point where you, much like Chris, you want it to be him because you want people to have their answers and you want it to be a happy answer. And it's not.
It's not. Yeah. And I felt like he was dead the whole time. I'm like, oh, he's dead. Now, with that was easy for me. I'm like, he's dead. That's what it is. You're confused. It's not Mr. Nirvana. Okay. But what I did not grasp is, like, I think because the author kept saying over and over again through Chris, my mother left me. My mother left me. That should have been my clue. But I'm thinking maybe she's somewhere hiding. And then I was like, of course she's dead too. Of course
I didn't even think about her, but I will say that when they do open the container and the minute they say that they see skeletal remains, I think a lot of people's first guess is going to be, it's Vince, like, but they say it's a woman's, like she remains wearing a dress.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's their mom. Yes. Like, of course he killed her. Duh.
Yeah.
Like,
minute. Yes. And you are right. When they open that thing, I'm like, oh, is a body in there? It's a body. And then I'm like, is it Vincent? And it wasn't. And then just like you, as soon as it said a dress and the long hair, and of course, what's his name? Rusty was out there in the police car, like staring hard. I'm like, oh no, he done killed her. He killed her.
And I am somebody who watches a lot of true crime and listens to a lot of true crime podcasts. And the amount of people who just don't get rid of dead bodies, and like, that's why they get caught, is like they find a dead body in their house, in their yard. It just baffles me. I'm just like, I really, and this is not to inspire people to go kill people and dump their bodies, but like,
oh my God, right?
It just amazes me, like, how difficult it seems for people to like get rid of a body.
I mean, I too listen and watch a lot of true crime. Too much. My husband always says, am I plotting to kill him? I'm like, no.
But I know how.
But I know how. And I know what not to do from these fools that got caught. But that's another story. But I'm like, I guess in some way they think, well, if I didn't get caught, no one found the body. If you can't find a body, there's no crime, right? You can't. So if they feel like the body's safe and it's more dangerous to try to get caught trying to move the thing, I guess you would just leave it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I've seen ones where like, they found somebody that's been dead for years, like in the house, like buried in the walls. And I'm like, well, if that's what you're going to do, you better be prepared to never let anyone in that house again and live there forever, because otherwise.
I mean, how long does it take for a skeleton to like completely, however long it takes for that smell to stop smelling?
Exactly. It's all about the smell. Just like, people will stop asking questions if somebody's like disappeared, but something starts smelling that bad, like the questions won't stop. They'll just keep coming.
Oh, I know. So I guess that's why he put her in a drum and put it in an empty storage bin that no one uses and no one's claimed.
Yeah, it worked for 15 years.
Yeah, that's so awful. And so this dude, Rusty, their father, he was like the worst kind of person on the planet.
Yeah, abusive, obviously a murderer, terrible. Like, he can rot in jail.
Yes. And then when we are introduced to him in present day, his ass is having lunch at the strip bar, at the strip club. I'm like, ew.
Yeah.
You gross.
Not shocked. In fact, that was one of my favorite scenes with Atticus, RIP, because he's like, she asks him, have you never been to a strip club? And he's like, oh no, my mom wouldn't allow that. Like my mom would get upset about that.
he was a really cute character.
I'm devastated that he did not make it out.
And even the scene where his mom brought him dinner, I'm like, oh, so cute. Like he would have been a great FBI agent.
Oh, for sure. It kind of reminds me of, did you watch that mini series they did with Kate Winslet and Evan Peters, and it's a mystery show. Oh God, the name is blanking me, but they're in like rural Pennsylvania. People made fun of their accents a lot on the show, but there's a very similar relationship dynamic on that show where it's like the older, seasoned, officer agent, and then the younger guy.
The Easttown, Mayor of Easttown. Yes.
Yeah. It's a very similar story and relationship dynamic in that, but this one doesn't get romantic. No. There is like hints of romance in Mayor of Easttown.
Yeah, that was a good show, by the way.
It was good.
I didn't exactly figure that out either. I was like, oh, that's what's happening. Got it.
Yeah. With a murder mystery like this, I always, from my training, and I mean training by watching hours and hours of mysteries, both fictional and non-fictional, is there's, whenever it takes place in like two different times, like my immediate thought is, well, who's connected to both times? Like it has to be somebody who is around from both those times. So I feel like once you get to that, your characters are pretty limited in terms of like who could possibly be the murderer.
Right. Well, in this case, though, I think that I can't remember his name, the principal's name, the principal... Stedman, yes. So Stedman wasn't really, there wasn't a connection. He was around, but there wasn't a clear connection until Atticus found it, which was the driving school. The driving school was the connection because he's the principal, but who would think to connect him? I wouldn't have.
That was enough for me.
Like, you're the principal, you did.
Well, because he said that he was a teacher in the 90s and then he was a principal. But there was the question of why did he, kill, one of the girls went to Catholic school, like she didn't go to the school. And so, but I didn't even necessarily need the driving school. I just thought about, like, they mentioned this one girl had an older boyfriend, that it was something kind of forbidden. So when you add that in, I'm like, okay, it's probably somebody who should not be hooking up with a high school girl. Right. And then also that, oh gosh, what was the other thing? He was around for both of them. Yeah, I mean, I guess that was really it. I just kind of was thinking like he's been there for all of it. And
okay, so the author presented him. We first met him through Ella. So he comforted Ella and gave her counsel throughout the years. So, he was presented as, hey, I got this troubled student. I need some help.
Or trustworthy, dad kind of figure.
Right. So at first, there was no reason to look at him. Like, he called her into this, which was twisted now that it was him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the author did a good job kind of concealing him for a while.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I didn't start thinking about it until they started bringing in the idea that one of the girl who had died, Katie, in the 90s had been pregnant and had given the baby up for adoption. And that's a whole other layer to add in.
Oh my God.
We find out the baby is now Jessie. But and so I just was thinking okay, that's another reason you want to hide something like that, is if it's with somebody that's inappropriate. And I guess I just thought he could have easily just wanted to wipe everybody else out. Because I guess that was my question was there one target, or was it always meant to be to kill everybody at each scene? And it really was just about eliminating witnesses, like people who knew about the relationship, and they just all happened to be in the same location at one time.
Right.
So
both times.
Both times, yeah.
Like in 2015 or whatever, he was sleeping with some girl. The girl told her sister, and the sister was like, I'm going to tell.
Yep. There you go. There you go.
Again, he's like, well, I'm just going to eliminate everyone that knows. And in the 90s, you know, when he was confronting Katie, I mean, he had a full-on argument with her outside. Yeah. And the other two girls came out and confronted him. They were like, we're going to tell all your fucking business if you don't leave her alone. And so, of course, they had to die. No question.
I'll tell you the part that really shocked the hell out of me, though, is when they finally figure it all out. And, you know, Agent Keller decides to arrest him. And he comes at her with a freaking arrow.
Yeah. Like an arrow.
Hits her with like a bow and arrow. I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. So random. I'm like, where did that come from? Okay.
Yeah. That would have been a nice plant to have maybe earlier. Like just something where I'm like, okay, this guy can do something, because the only thing that connected to was that there was a knife found in Vince's locker. I guess that was the other reason too I thought about him, was I kept thinking it had to be like a teacher or the principal, you know, just because of the access to like the lockers. But
yeah, they tried the janitor, but it wasn't him.
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah,
no, this was one where I fairly early assumed it would be him. I've also been led to not trust people in general, I guess. So whenever somebody is like the one calling them up, or, you know, to come consult on the case, or, oh, I'm here to help you and help integrate myself into the investigation, my immediate thought is that's sus. Like something's up.
Yeah, because you're too into, you want to be in this. So yeah. Yeah, that whole last scene was nuts, and the arrow was nuts, and then he's like stabbing her. He like he tried to choke her. I'm like, oh my God, you trying to choke out the pregnant lady?
Yeah, and then the most badass, I mean, I know she's like 8.5 months pregnant, and should she be doing this at all? No, but she is a total badass.
And her husband calls her that.
She pulls the arrow, like the tip of the arrow, out of her chest and like rams this mofo like right up through the neck chin area.
Yeah, through his chin, through his mouth, like the soft palate.
That was the moment where I was like, make the miniseries now. Make it. I want to see this. I want to see this all play out. I can envision it in my head.
Yeah. So he's choking her and she's pulling the arrow out and she stabs him like right in the face. I'm like, oh my God.
Badass.
It is badass. It is. Although I agree, she should not have been doing that stuff, because at first she did. Like during this whole thing, she actually thought about her baby. She was like, oh no, they're not really moving right now. She like apologizes and everything. Like, you know I shouldn't have been doing this. And even going into that situation, she's like, I should wait for backup. But Atticus isn't there. I should wait for backup. She kept arguing with herself. Like, I shouldn't go in there.
Yeah.
But
that's tough. And that's a tough position to be in. And she knew that she shouldn't have been going in anyway. I have to say, even though she is very, very pregnant, I was really surprised by and impressed by how well she was treated and respected by all of the characters, because I feel like I always kind of have a little bit of a hesitancy when I read a book that's from a female point of view that's written by a man. And especially when you're going into this one and you have multiple POVs and you have a woman who's almost 9 months pregnant. And I was like, oh no, these people are going to treat her awful just because she's pregnant. Like, that's such a typical thing, especially in a very male dominated field like law enforcement. But no, people were really, they revered her. Like she really, because she got the job done. And there was, the one cop that kind of gave her some flack, but I think it was more of just kind of like his demeanor in general. And so I was really impressed by how well her superiors and her her colleagues treated her throughout the book. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I agree. I also kind of liked how the author, I guess, worked with her character in the respect that, like, sometimes I feel like they overcompensate by making them really like a hard ass or a hard person to get along with and overbearing. Like, they overcompensate like in that way, but she was really balanced. And actually a couple of times she's like, oh, I should say something, but I won't. I'm gonna try to go with the flow. I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings. I'm like, oh, she's soft, but she's not. She a badass. I'm like, okay, I love it.
Yeah. I really liked her. And I didn't realize this until I read a couple of the Goodreads reviews, but somebody had mentioned that they were so excited to see Agent Sarah Keller in this book again, because I guess she pops up in the previous book, which I think is called Every Last Fear. And I don't really know like what her role is in that, if it's like a much smaller role or what, but I thought that was cool. I love a good character Easter egg. It's something that happens in romance novels all the time, is kind of like this Marvel universe of characters. And I liked that. So I think that's just even one more reason why I would be interested to go read the previous book that Alex Finlay wrote.
I'm absolutely going to read it. Actually, that's been on my TBR since it came out in 2021. But I just, for whatever reason, I never got to it. So now I'm like, well, this is the newer book. I'll just let's read this one.
And then work your way back. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So now I'm very curious now. I did not know that she was in that other book. That's cool.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that, because I would read a whole series of books with Agent Sarah Keller. I like Agent Sarah Keller.
And honestly, he opened the door for that, because now at the end, she's moving to a different area of the FBI. Her husband has given her the green light to be badass, and he's fine.
Love him.
Yes.
Like her husband, Bob. He gets up when she can't sleep at night. And like, instead of just going to sleep, is like, no, let me go get the ice cream and we can like chat about it. He stays home to take care of the kids. I loved him.
He totes 2 twins to have lunch with her once a week.
Calls his wife a badass. Like, if we could all be lucky enough to have a Bob in our lives.
I think the author is like, let me make some likable men.
Yeah, honestly, that's kind of what it felt like, because again, it's no shade towards like every male author, but I just feel like there's a reason I love reading romance so much. And it's usually because I read a lot more women who look and sound like me, and I read a lot more men who are more palatable than the ones I meet on Tinder. So it's just a whole different playing field.
Yeah. I also think he did an okay job with like adding a little teeny sprinkle of diversity in here. Just a little,
Although Atticus is one of them, and he
died. Yeah, he died.
Yeah. I could
have did a little better, but it's okay.
I did think about that. I did think about that as I was reading it. I was like, ooh, this is the one, like one of the only people of color in this book is going to be the one that gets the axe.
Yeah, he died.
Yikes.
He was a real likable character too. I'm like,
I know.
I did notice that, but I'm like, well, I mean, I guess I should be glad there's something, but I wish it was a little bit more.
Yeah, but I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I did appreciate though that there was, at least a little bit of diversity in it.
Mm-hmm. Which is a lot of, unfortunately, I think I read, just because of what's available, I think I read a lot more white authors in this genre than non-white authors. So there's not a whole lot in a lot of these books. There's not a whole lot of color going on or diversity.
I think you could apply that statement to every genre.
Yeah, like, pretty much.
Honestly, like, I mean, there's absolutely, authors of color who are writing diverse representation, and there's white authors who also as well are putting in diversity into their books, but it's by no means like an equal balance.
Oh, no.
I mean, it's not even close.
No, it's not. And that's why, like, honestly, we've been trying to, here on the podcast, we've been trying to incorporate a lot of different types of authors of all different, so we have some variety.
Yeah. No, that's great. It makes us all better readers and better, people in general, Absolutely. I feel like.
Yeah. So just wanted to mention that. So if you guys pick this up after we've talked about it, you won't be like, oh my God. Ah! It is what it is, y'all. All right. So what else should we talk about? Anything else on your list that you want to address specifically?
I feel like we've covered a lot of the characters. I will say, tying in with the Mr. Nirvana aspect, I meant to bring it up before. I didn't really care for these like scenes of like screenwriting that were written in to like describe the video sequence that we would see. I have a screenwriting background, so that's kind of like why it stood out to me, was like, this is interesting. I don't know if it's that I disliked it. It just kind of felt unnecessary to me. Like I would have just as rather had the video described like in paragraph format, but okay. I'm just one of those people where if it's not consistent, like throughout the story, it'll bother me. Like anytime you have like voiceover in a movie, but it's in one scene, or anytime you have a chapter POV written for one person that then we never see again. It's something that just kind of, it's a petty note for sure, but it's something that just doesn't necessarily tickle my fancy.
Now, listening on audiobook, though, I think it was a different experience because the whole time I'm like, okay, there's 4 narrators, 2 women and 2 men. Where's the other guy at? I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, oh, he's doing the video parts. Oh, so it was like, so imagine you're watching a travel vlogger on YouTube, but you're only listening. So it sounded like I was listening to a travel vlog.
So because I would assume the voice artists are doing different points of view for Ella, Keller, and Chris.
Right.
And then the fourth one was
the travel vlogger.
Huh. I never would have thought about that, but I guess that makes more sense to me now hearing that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because and it was a different and it did, because I do watch travel vlogs, and ironically enough, I saw a portion of an interview. I didn't see the whole thing, where he was talking about how for a minute he was really into watching travel vlogs on YouTube. So he wanted to incorporate that somehow, and he wasn't sure how he was going to do it. So the way he was going to do it, it didn't work out. And then he changed it so that it fit into the story more.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah. So when he started, the idea that the travel vlogger was going to be Vincent or could be Vincent was not in his mind at all. And then he went back.
See, and that almost makes more sense to me now, because I'm almost like, that was one of the pieces that we talked about where we're like, this feels like it was almost added in. It feels like an extra piece. And that's just one of those things where that kind of makes sense to me more hearing that, in that, did we need it all along? I don't know. But at the same time, I do like that there was still that question of like, is Vince still around? And I guess that just kind of gave us some piece of hope to cling to, that he was like something that was at least tangential, that we could like see like, oh, there is an actual person in this world that might be Vince, not just like thoughts about could Vince be out there.
It did make it seem more tangible. Yeah. But even though the whole time I knew it wasn't him. So
you're like, he's dead.
It's not him. Like, give up that. Let it go. It's not him. Because why? I mean, how they showed the brothers, as young as they were, their relationship, what their relationship was like, there's no way he would just ghost him. He wouldn't. Even if he ran, he would find a way to get in contact with him, because they both experienced their mother leaving, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
So there's no way he would have ghosted him. That's why I'm like, he's dead, dude. He's dead.
And that again, I feel like that's such a instrumental part of like so many mystery thrillers is like, if somebody that you had this incredible relationship with has been gone all this time, I immediately assume that they're dead. Like, I just, because it's like, what would be the other explanation? You know, I mean, I'm sure there are other ones, like other possibilities, but like the chance of that is just, you know, so out there that I do usually assume they're dead. They usually are dead.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing that I really loved is like, this was kind of like a fun take on like the last girl trope, the final girl. Cause that's like a, you know, recurring thing in mysteries and thriller and horror is like, there's the one girl left standing, which is always a girl. And
of course
it was in this time in both 1999 in Blockbuster and at the ice cream shop. So I liked that too. I liked that there was kind of like, okay, well, what happens afterwards? Like, it does make me wonder, had they not caught him, would he do it again? And I'm sure he would have, because I don't know why there was such a gap in between, though. Like, I kind of think that he probably, Stedman, the principal, I think he probably had affairs with other students in between then and now.
And he just never really got attached to one, or the ones that he was dealing with actually managed to keep their mouth shut until he was done with them. Because that was the trigger for the first girl. He wanted her and she didn't want him anymore. And the second girl was like, she didn't want him anymore either. Well, the sister didn't want, you know. So in between, maybe he just found people that he could just use and he wasn't like attached to them. So
yeah, because he can break up with them. That's fine. They can't break up with him.
Or, you know, they graduate from high school and they're gone. Maybe he moves on.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I found the characters very likable and interesting. I mean, if anything, I just feel like I had a lot of questions at the end that I wanted answered, because I thought the characters deserved more than they got. But other than that, I really did enjoy it, and I would 100% recommend it to people.
All right, me too. So with that said, let's rate it. Let's rate it 1 to 5. No halves. We want Goodreads style. You can't put a half on Goodreads.
I know. I'm such a halfer too. Oh.
All right, you first.
Okay. I did give a Goodreads rating. I gave it 4 out of 5. And I think for me, it's tough to even give a 5 out of 5 for a lot of books. 4 out of 5 is kind of I feel like how I rate a lot of the books that I read, where I say, did I enjoy the experience? Yes. Is this something I would recommend to somebody else? Yes. Would I read more from this author? Yeah. Yes. And so for me, that's a 4.
Okay. I'm with you on the 4. Initially, I was teetering between a 3 and a 4. But the one thing that I think tipped me over is, like you, I would read his other book. If it weren't that good, if it were a 3, if it was a real 3, I would not read more. I just kind of just leave it, right? Yeah. It's fine. But it's better than fine. I didn't know who the killer was right away. And usually I can guess. Usually I guess a lot of the time.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. And yes, there were too many characters at first, but I got used to them.
You have to give it a chance, I guess. Like, because I'm with you. It was a lot of people to have to learn their names and follow and remember, okay, wait, which mystery are they from? Okay. What is their connection to modern day? Got it. But, you know, we made our lists. We made our notes.
Like when you have to revert to paper, good old fashioned pen and paper to keep things straight.
Yep. Arrows, hearts, whatever works for you.
Whatever works. But that makes it even more, I think, kind of fun. It's like, well, let me write this down so I don't forget things. Like, I think I'm more engaged that way as well. So that also kind of bumped it a little bit, actually, the extra work. So yeah, definitely it's a solid 4.
I think you kind of alluded to it, but I think the writing style was great too. Like, I think you're right that sometimes you can read a book where the plot is like so great, but like the way it's delivered is just meh. And this is one of those ones where I thought the plot was great. I thought the characters were great. You know, it let me down a little bit in the end, but I loved his writing style. It was very fun, especially if you have lived in both the 90s and the 2000s. You'll get some of the references, and I like that. That's something I love, a good pop culture moment in my books.
Yes, love it. Yes, good stuff. Okay, sounds like we liked it and we recommended y'all. So if you have a chance to check out The Night Shift, please do. If you have read it already, comment below on whatever platform you're listening to, or come on over to Shelf Addiction Official on Facebook and let's talk about it there. Or on Patreon, leave us a comment, below, and I will reply back. So it's been a fun time. Thank you so much for joining me, Kelly.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun and such a step outside of my reading. So I really enjoyed it.
Yay, I'm glad. Hopefully one day we can do this again. It's been a blast. And of course, you guys, if you are curious about her podcast or reaching out to her, I will have her socials and her podcast link in the show notes. So you can click down there and find that. So we are done today, and it's been a blast. Glad you're listening to the end. Please leave a like or a subscribe before you leave, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Take care, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to show your support, there are a few things you can do. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review, or like this episode on your favorite podcast player. It seems so simple, but it really helps me out. You can share this podcast with other book nerd friends or on your favorite social media space. You can also join the Shelf Addiction Patreon family. For as little as $2 a month, you will help us produce even more awesome content for your ears. You can also consider joining the Shelf Addiction Official Facebook group, where we talk all things bookish and more in a safe space. The Shelf Addiction Podcast is a part of the Nerdy Maven Network. You can also reach us via email at info@shelfaddiction.com. Thank you for listening.